Hello, I'm Audrey Tang, and you are watching Better Taiwan.
Hi, I'm Joey, and this is another episode of Better Taiwan, where we talk about the impact of COVID-19 on the livelihood of the people on this island and what we're doing to overcome these obstacles and difficulties. Today, we speak with Minister without Portfolio Audrey Tang Feng, who's joined us here on the show. As former software programmer, now turned digital minister of Taiwan, her main missions are to 1. Make our government more transparent, 2. To assist in not just industrial innovation, but also social innovation, and 3. To encourage more public engagement. Taiwan has maintained relative success in our fight against COVID-19. Many would accredit this to the painful experiences that we learned back in 2003 from the SARS epidemic. This time, we mobilized better, we were better informed, and our public is more cooperative. So, Minister, would you, however, argue that maybe this time around we also had more competent leadership to help organize ourselves against COVID-19?
Well, actually, I would say some of the same leaders, like Dr. Chen Jianren,
Yeah.
matured over the 17 years. And also, I mean, he's the academician, the epidemiologist.
Yes.
And at the time, our vice president.
Yes.
And still, he is very humble. Everybody knows about that. Recorded a crash course on Hahao. I think 20,000 participants attended a crash course the first day,
Yes.
myself included. And so it strikes me that because our top epidemiology expert, incidentally, is our vice president.
Yeah,
there's
right.
no need, as with SARS, that they need to convince the political leader because he is the political leader now.
Okay, so in a sense, you would argue that we may have gotten a little lucky that everything came together in just the right way, from the public's growing awareness for information transparency to the right people leading in the right positions. Of course, the technology is also very different compared to 17 years ago. As the country's digital minister, Minister Tang, you're at the helm of many apps, softwares, platforms to help fight against COVID-19. Can you tell us about some of these projects?
Sure. So my main contribution is that when there are new social innovations, that is to say, when a bunch of people from Tainan made a map that showed the availability of masks based on crowd reporting, they showed nearby places to collect masks. And I showed this with this very iPad to the premier. And so when they could not afford to pay the Google Place API usage fee and had to close that after just running for 2 days, the premier, after seeing this idea, understood the importance of it and said that we must mobilize our state resources to keep this young person's idea floating. And he's in Tainan. He never visited Taipei. He never had to do a single face-to-face meeting. We just decided that it's like reverse procurement. The social sector has this great idea, and the state must work to make it happen.
Right. Well, COVID-19 has a lot of negative impacts, but good practices of digital democracy, I think that's what we can call it, such as these, are the silver linings. Do you see any other situations where we may potentially benefit from a post-COVID-19 environment?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, the mask dedication system that we wrote, some people refer it as mask 4.0. I'm okay with people calling it that. As of today, there's more than 5 million medical masks being dedicated by people who did not collect these masks, but instead offer it for international humanitarian assistance. That's 659,000 citizens, and around half of them revealed their name, myself included. And so it's not the Taiwan government donating the mask, it's the Taiwan government and the citizens dedicating the mask to the international frontline workers. And after the Taiwan quality of medical masks get approved and have a international credit, we're now also exporting this whole manufacturing line. So anywhere in the world, if you give us, and really our economic sector, a parcel of land, some electricity and water supply, they'll happily transfer their know-how to your local technologists so that you can also churn out 2 million masks per day, 24 hours a day on N95 or R95. And so basically having this idea of made in Taiwan being renewed attention in the international stage, I think is what the silver lining is for COVID, because people now understand that Taiwan is the place not only with very good digital models, but also with excellent manufacturing smart machinery capabilities.
Yeah, and you mentioned something that I think people didn't previously know about Taiwan, which is that we have a lot of exceptional programmers on this island. A lot of our college graduates end up working for, say, now very successful startup companies in the Silicon Valley. Do you see this becoming a new soft power of Taiwan that the world is starting to learn about?
Yeah, because a lot of the ideas around our social innovation are open source. The mask maps, the top 2 maps at the moment are open source. So people in South Korea, for example, use that to convince their government to publish the API, the application programming interface of the mass storage, essentially pointing at the Taiwan model and telling their municipalities and the central government to follow the Taiwan model closely. And of course, the first running mass map in Korea is from Finjen Kyang, Jiang Minzong, who is in Tainan. I think he doesn't speak Korean language, but nevertheless contributed to the healthcare, public health efforts there. So yeah, I think this international solidarity is unprecedented. Okay. We run a hackathon called cohack.tw, a lot of privacy enhancing technologies that make sure that people keep their digital diaries, but do not share it to any cloud service, but rather work directly with contact tracers to divulge the absolutely necessary information without compromising the privacy of others. That, again, is a really good idea that came out of the coronavirus hackathon, cohack.tw.
Okay, so you're a known advocate of e-governance, and for those of us who are not entirely familiar with the term, myself included, could you give us a brief definition of e-governance and what headways we have made in this sector?
Well, nowadays we just call it a national participation platform. We never like the E prefix so much. It used to be called a national e-participation platform. But, nowadays I just say, I'll mail you, and I mean email.
Right.
if I want to say post office mail, I would have said that, right?
Yeah.
So yeah. I think that's kind of the point. It's the mainstreaming of digital competence. People not afraid of the digital tools. They choose the right tools to amplify their voices, to participate in democracy more, knowing fully that no matter how remote you are, even on the topmost point in Taiwan, almost 4,000 meters, you're guaranteed to have 10 megabits per second at $16 per month, unlimited 4G connection. If you don't, it's my fault. And so it's weaving the digital into the everyday culture, and people taking advantage of a heavily connected society to contribute in massive listening at scale. That is digital governance. And sometimes we just drop the digital. Maybe in 10 years, we'll have no digital minister. We'll have one analog minister because every other minister is digital.
And now, final question for you, Minister. National Development Council has been working in close relations with us, ICRT, to help Taiwan become a bilingual nation by 2030. I understand that when you first traveled abroad, all by yourself, to connect with programmers from around the world, you only had a basic grasp of the English language at first. But as our listeners can hear now that you are very articulate in the English language, how did you learn English?
I know. So I know basic programming vocabulary, but most of my conversational vocabulary came from a game called Magic: The Gathering, which I'm pretty good at one time. And so my basic vocabulary are actually very difficult words like annul or abeyance, or these are just real card names.
Yes.
And so these are my first English vocabulary, and they're set in particular cultures in fantasy land or in real land and myth land and things like that. So my vocabulary expands whenever there's a new expansion.
Well, I agree. As someone who dabbles in tabletop games such as Dungeons and Dragons, I agree that fantasy fiction vocabulary is definitely very difficult to get a hang of.
I know.
And if you can manage that, then you can pretty much manage anything. Of course, it's also important to start with an interest that gives you motivation to learn any language, really. Well, Minister Tang, it's been an absolute pleasure and an honor to chat with you. Thank you for all you've done for Taiwan, and thank you for joining us here on Better Taiwan.
And thank you for the great interview. Live long and prosper.